What happened before the attitude? Before she rolled her eyes, before she raised her voice, before she walked away, before she refused to go to ISS, before somebody called her defiant, before somebody said she was disrespectful, before somebody said black girls give me the most trouble. What happened before that? And I'm not just asking what happened 5 minutes before. I'm asking what happened 5 years before, 10 years before. What has happened throughout this child's experience with school? How many times has she been corrected? How many times has she been written up? How many classrooms has she been removed from? How many adults have known her disciplinary history before they actually knew her? How many times has confidence been interpreted as attitude? How many times has frustration been labeled disrespect? How many times has somebody punished her behavior without ever asking what that behavior might be communicating? And eventually, what happens when a child decides that school isn't really for her? Today, we're talking about Black girls, but we're also talking about us, the adults, the educators, the institutions, the systems. Because maybe the question isn't simply, why is she giving us so much trouble? Maybe we need to ask, how much trouble has school been for her? This is The Advocate. Let's talk about it. Welcome back to The Advocate Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kristi N. Love. And today's episode began with a conversation with a school administrator about student discipline. During that conversation, he shared that throughout his career, the students who had given him the most trouble were Black girls. And I want to just say this up front. This episode is not about attacking that administrator. Actually, I appreciated the conversation because it made me think. And if you know anything about me, you know I'm going to ask questions. I wanted to know, was this across different schools, different districts? Were these predominantly Black schools, predominantly white schools? Had these girls been educated within the same system from elementary through high school? Because when I hear that a pattern seems to follow children across schools, my educator brain doesn't immediately ask, what's wrong with these kids? I want to know, what have these children experienced? What kind of social emotional learning did they receive? What restorative practices existed in their schools? Were their teachers culturally responsive? Were relationships intentionally built? Were behavioral skills explicitly taught? Or did these girls spend years being corrected, written up, removed, suspended, and told to behave differently without anybody consistently teaching them how? Because behavior doesn't just appear. Behavior tells a story. And sometimes, if we're courageous enough to listen, the story includes us. Let's go.
Dr. Kristi N. Love is an experienced educator and advocate dedicated to empowering students and families to ensure children receive a high-quality education. She specializes in culturally responsive teaching, restorative practices, and social emotional learning, helping schools create supportive and inclusive environments. Through the Advocate podcast, she amplifies voices, challenges inequitable systems, and keeps children at the center of every conversation.
During that conversation, I heard about a 17-year-old Black girl. I'm intentionally leaving out identifying information because this isn't about putting this particular child on display. Her situation simply made me ask bigger questions. So she was out of dress code. She was told to correct it. Later, she was seen out of dress code again. The decision was made that she had already been given an opportunity to comply, so she was assigned in-school suspension, or ISS. She refused to go, so the decision was made to send her home. Now, I understand the administrative progression. There was a rule, she knew the rule. She was redirected, she didn't follow the direction. She received a consequence, she refused the consequence. So the consequence escalated. I understand the logic. But understanding the logic doesn't mean I can't question the outcome. So I asked, where was she when she refused to go to ISS? Was she disrupting a classroom? Was she creating a safety issue? Was she preventing other children from learning? Or was she already sitting in an office? Because if she's already sitting in an office, why couldn't she stay there? Give her the work, give her a desk, let her work in the principal's office, the assistant principal's office, a conference room, some supervised space. And if she refuses to do the work, okay, then she sits there. But she's still at school. She's still connected to the institution. She's still available for somebody to talk to. She's still available for somebody to try again. And she's not at home. Because once we send her home, we've moved from discipline to exclusion. And that matters. Then I learned something else. This 17-year-old girl is also the mother of a very young baby. And that made me wonder something else. What if she wanted to go home? Now, let me be very clear. I don't know that she did. I don't know this young lady at all. I don't know what she was thinking. And I don't want to create a story for her that she hasn't told us herself. But as educators, particularly if we're talking about behavior, we at least have to consider function. If going home is desirable, look at the sequence we may have unintentionally created. Dress code violation, refuse ISS, go home. If home is where she wanted to be, what exactly did our consequence teach? That's not being soft on behavior, that's understanding behavior. If a consequence provides the student with exactly what the student wanted, then we have to consider whether we're reinforcing the very behavior we're trying to decrease. But there's something even bigger here. This girl is 17 years old, and she has a baby. So now her educational future isn't connected only to her. Her future is connected to somebody else's future. Every credit matters. Every class matters. Every day of instruction matters. Graduation matters. Post-secondary opportunities matter. Employment matters. Economic stability matters. Because there's a baby whose future is connected to the opportunities available to that young mother. And 20 years from now, nobody's going to care what that girl was wearing that afternoon. But whether she finished school, that could matter for generations. Now, somebody is listening is probably saying, Dr. Love, come on. She still has to follow the rules. Yes, absolutely. I'm not arguing that children shouldn't have expectations. I'm not saying students can simply refuse adults when they feel like it. I'm not saying dress codes should never exist. And I'm definitely not saying Black girls shouldn't be held accountable. I'm asking whether accountability always has to mean exclusion. There's a difference. And I'm asking us to practice something that I think is disappearing from far too many disciplinary actions. Curiosity before consequence. Understanding is not excusing. I can tell a child what you did was inappropriate and still ask what happened. I can say you cannot speak to people that way and still ask what got you this upset. I can hold a student accountable and simultaneously help that student develop the skills to handle the situation differently next time. That's education. We're supposed to teach. And I have said this over and over. If a child cannot read, we teach. If a child struggles with math, we intervene. If a child struggles with writing, we scaffold. We model, we reteach, we practice. But let a child struggle with emotional regulation, conflict resolution, responding to correction, managing frustration, communicating disagreement. And suddenly we stop teaching. Oh, she knows better. She's too old for this. She has an attitude. She's disrespectful. But my question remains, what if she doesn't know how to do better yet? And even if she does know better, what is preventing her from accessing the skill in that moment? That's worth knowing. And here's where I need to bring myself into this conversation for just a moment. Because I am a Black woman. And before I became Dr. Love, before I became an educator, before I became the person sitting behind this microphone asking these questions, I was a cute little Black girl sitting in classrooms too. But I need to acknowledge something. I did not experience school the way some of the Black girls I'm talking about today experience school. And I don't want my Blackness to make me assume that I automatically understand their experiences. I don't. I attended predominantly white schools for a part of my education and predominantly Black schools for another part. And overall, I had a positive school experience. I was well behaved, I worked hard, I had structure and support at home. My mother took me to church, and my faith was an important influence in my life even then. I had adults around me who reinforced expectations and helped me learn how to navigate school. And school responded positively to me. I was trusted by teachers. I was selected to represent my school. I was identified for advanced academic experiences. Adults saw potential in me, and they found ways to nurture it. And while preparing this episode, I started wondering, why? Why was my experience so different? And I don't think there's one simple answer. Maybe part of it was my personality. Maybe part of it was how I behaved. Maybe part of it was the support I had at home. Maybe I understood, consciously or unconsciously, how to navigate the expectations of school. Probably all of those things played some role. But then I had to ask myself a harder question. What if I hadn't? What if I had been the child who struggled to regulate her emotions? What if I had challenged adults? What if I had come to school angry? What if circumstances at home had been completely different? What if instead of being the child teachers trusted, I had become the child teachers warned each other about? Would the adults around me still have worked as hard to discover what was inside me? And that's why I don't want this conversation to become about the good Black girl versus the bad Black girl. Because there is no bad Black girl. There are Black girls with different experiences, different supports, different temperaments, different needs, different ways of communicating, different levels of trust in adults, and sometimes very different reasons for the behaviors we see. I wasn't more worthy of being nurtured because I was compliant. I wasn't more deserving because adults found me easy to teach. And the Black girl sitting in ISS isn't less worthy because right now she's harder to reach. That's what I keep coming back to. Do children have to make themselves easy for us to love before we're willing to invest in them? Because if they do, we're going to miss some incredible children. And even with my positive school experience, there was something important that school missed. I graduated high school with a 4.0 GPA. I was the captain of my basketball team. I was a member of the National Honor Society and other groups at school. I was involved in church and my community. Neither of my parents had attended college, and my siblings had gone to college through basketball scholarships. So basketball was the pathway to college that I understood. But during my senior year, I had 2 knee surgeries. And suddenly, the pathway I knew was no longer available to me. Academically, I had positioned myself to pursue scholarships, but I didn't know how to navigate that process. I needed someone who understood college access to say, Kristi, you have a 4.0. Let's look at these scholarships. Here are the deadlines. Here's what you need. Let's make sure you apply. And that didn't happen. I don't share that because I'm bitter about it. I share it because it reminds me that even a child who appears to be doing everything right can have needs adults don't see. I was achieving, I was behaving, I was involved, and there was still something I needed. I needed guidance. The girl we've been talking about may need something completely different. She may need restoration. She may need behavioral support. She may need flexibility. She may need connection. She may need an adult determined to keep her connected to school. Different children need different things. And that's the point. Our responsibility isn't simply to reward the children who already know how to navigate the system. Our responsibility is to see the child in front of us and figure out what she needs to succeed. And if we can miss the needs of the child who's making straight A's, imagine how easy it is to stop looking for the needs of a child we've already labeled difficult. And that brings me to something we cannot ignore in this conversation. Adultification. Research has shown that adults can perceive Black girls as older and less innocent than white girls of the same age. Black girls can be viewed as needing less nurturing, less protection, less support, less comfort. Think about what that can mean inside a school. If I unconsciously perceive a Black girl as older than she actually is, I may expect more emotional maturity from her. I may give her less patience, less grace. I may interpret developmentally normal behavior as intentional defiance. I may expect her to regulate emotions she hasn't yet learned how to regulate. And sometimes life itself can make these girls appear older. Some Black girls go home and cook and clean, take care of siblings, help manage households. Some carry responsibilities that would overwhelm adults. And the young lady who started this conversation, she's 17 and raising a baby. But hear me. Having adult responsibilities does not magically give a child an adult brain. She's a mother, and she's 17. Both are true. She can change diapers in the middle of the night and still need somebody to nurture her. She can be responsible for another human being and still need adults to guide her. She can make a poor decision and still need another chance. She's raising somebody's child, but she's still somebody's child too. Then there is subjectivity. Think about some of the words we use in discipline. Defiant, disrespectful, disruptive, insubordinate, attitude. What exactly does disrespect look like? Sometimes it's obvious, but sometimes it's incredibly subjective. Was it what she said? Her tone? Her facial expression? Did she roll her eyes? Did she sigh? Did she ask why? Did she say something wasn't fair? Did she walk away? Did she refuse to look at you? Who gets to decide when assertiveness becomes disrespect? I've heard educators say, I can tolerate a lot, but I will not tolerate disrespect. Okay, but define it. If we're going to remove a child from instruction because of disrespect, shouldn't we be able to explain exactly what behavior we're talking about? And shouldn't we examine whether we're interpreting that behavior consistently across children? Because our biases don't disappear because we become educators. Our cultural expectations don't disappear. Our beliefs about what a good girl should look like and sound like don't disappear. Quiet, agreeable, pleasant, compliant. But what happens when a Black girl is expressive, confident, direct, frustrated? What happens when she challenges something she believes is unfair? What do we call her? And more importantly, would we use the same word if another child did the exact same thing? And we cannot have this conversation without talking about dress code. Two girls can technically wear similar clothing, but clothing looks different on different bodies. One girl may be thin, another may have developed curves. And suddenly, the same shorts don't seem like the same shorts anymore. The same shirt doesn't seem like the same shirt, and girls notice. I've heard girls say, her skirt is shorter than mine. Why didn't she get dress coded? We're wearing basically the same thing. Sometimes they may be wrong, but what if sometimes they're right? Because once enforcement depends on an adult determining whether clothing is too tight, too revealing, too distracting, too inappropriate, subjectivity enters the equation. And wherever there is subjectivity, bias can enter too. So when we say the rule is the rule, I want us to ask, is every child actually experiencing the same rule? And these questions aren't just coming out of nowhere. National discipline data show that Black girls experience exclusionary discipline at rates dramatically disproportionate to their enrollment. A 2024 report from the U.S. Government Accountability Office examined discipline among girls in public schools. Black girls represented about 15% of girls in public schools, but received almost half of the suspensions and expulsions given to girls in the data examined. And the disparities weren't limited to completely different kinds of behavior. Black girls experienced harsher discipline than white girls for similar categories of behavior, including things like defiance, disrespect, and disruption. Those numbers should make us uncomfortable, but not defensive. Curious. Because when the same group of children is disproportionately experiencing exclusion across schools and across states, we cannot continue locating the entire problem inside those children. So when someone says, Black girls give me the most trouble, I want us to turn the question around. What if Black girls in schools have been having trouble with each other? That's different. Because the first statement asks us to fix the girls. The second requires us to examine the relationship. And relationships have at least two sides. We met this young lady at 17, but she didn't enter school at 17. She entered as a little girl. What happened in kindergarten? First grade, third grade, fifth grade, middle school. How many teachers knew her? I mean, really knew her. How many knew something about her besides her behavior? How much social emotional learning did she receive? How many restorative conversations? How many culturally responsive educators? How many adults asked what was happening before they wrote the referral? How many adults helped her repair a relationship after conflict instead of simply serving her a consequence? And how many times did she sit in ISS? How much instruction did she miss? How many suspensions? How many times did somebody call home? How many times did she hear adults say she had an attitude? At what point does a child start expecting conflict? At what point does she stop trusting adults at school? At what point does she walk into an interaction already wearing armor? And then we look at the armor and say, see, that's exactly the problem. But maybe some of what we're calling attitude is protection. Maybe some of it has been learned. Maybe some of it is developed because experience taught her that she needed it. How many Black girls learned to protect themselves from school because school never felt like a place that protected them? So let's return to the original story. The 17-year-old. She refused ISS. Okay, now what? Why do our choices have to become comply or go home? Could she have stayed in the office? Could she have completed assignments there? Could a counselor have spoken with her? Could another adult with whom she had a relationship have been called? Could someone have waited until the emotions came down? Could an administrator have said, we're not going to argue. You're staying here today. Your presence is needed here today. You're going to get your work. When we're both ready, we'll figure out the next step. Could somebody have asked, what would help you stay in school today? Maybe she still receives a consequence. That's okay. Restorative practice does not mean no consequence. SEL does not mean no accountability. Culturally responsive teaching does not mean lowering expectations. Relationships do not mean allowing children to do whatever they want. It means we remember the purpose. What are we trying to accomplish? Are we trying to win or are we trying to teach? Are we trying to establish who's in charge or are we trying to change behavior? Are we trying to make her pay or are we trying to make sure she succeeds? Because those goals can lead adults to very different decisions. Sometimes the most powerful thing an educator can communicate to a child is, you made a poor choice today and you're still staying in school. We're still going to get your work. We're still going to deal with what happened. Tomorrow, we're going to try again. And I'm still not giving up on you. Imagine what that teaches. You can be angry and still belong here. You can disagree and still belong here. You can make mistakes and still belong here. You can have a terrible day and still belong here. You can frustrate me and still belong here. You do not have to earn your belonging through perfect behavior. And maybe that's what some of our Black girls desperately need to hear. Not, I don't care what you've been through, but I care what you've been through, and I still believe you're capable of more. That's accountability with relationship. That's accountability with dignity. That's accountability that doesn't throw children away. Listen, we tell children to take accountability constantly. Own your choices. Accept responsibility. There are consequences for your actions. Okay, what about us? If Black girls are disproportionately disciplined, if Black girls can be perceived as older and less innocent, if subjective behaviors such as defiance and disrespect contribute to disparities, if students spend years cycling through classrooms, offices, ISS, and suspensions, at what point do educational institutions have to take some accountability too? Have we invested in SEL? Have we implemented restorative practices with fidelity? Have we trained educators to recognize adultification and implicit bias? Are we practicing culturally responsive pedagogy? Are we building authentic relationships? Are we examining our discipline data by race and gender? Which teachers generate the most referrals? For what behaviors? Which behaviors are subjective? Who gets redirected quietly? Who gets written up? Who gets a second chance? Who gets removed? Who gets sent home? Who gets grace? Because data shouldn't just tell us what children are doing. Data should make us examine what adults are doing too. And I want to say this as clearly as I can. I am not asking schools to stop holding Black girls accountable. I am asking, have we held ourselves accountable for what Black girls have experienced in our care? So the next time a Black girl is standing in front of us with folded arms, the next time she rolls her eyes, the next time her tone isn't what we want it to be, the next time she says no, before we say, there she goes again, before we call her disrespectful, before we call her difficult, before we decide she doesn't care, ask, what happened before the attitude? And don't just look back 5 minutes. Look back 5 years, maybe 10. What has school taught her about adults, about authority, about herself? Does she believe we're going to listen? Does she believe we're going to be fair? Does she believe we actually like her? Does she believe we want her here? Does she believe this school belongs to her too? And then ask yourself, what am I about to teach her with my response? Because discipline teaches. Every time. Sometimes it teaches responsibility. Sometimes it teaches boundaries. Sometimes it teaches repair. And sometimes it teaches rejection. Sometimes it teaches when you're difficult, we remove you. When you frustrate us, we send you away. When we don't know what else to do with you, you lose access to us. And I don't want that to be the lesson. As I prepared this episode, I kept thinking about that little Black girl I used to be. The girl teachers trusted. The girl who was given chances to grow. The girl who was tested. The girl who was selected. the girl somebody saw potential in. That little girl eventually became Dr. Kristi N. Love, an educator, an advocate, a mother, a woman sitting behind a microphone asking adults to look differently at children. But what if? But what if I hadn't been easy for school to love? Would they still have seen me? And that's what I want to leave with you. How many Dr. Loves are sitting in ISS right now? How many future doctors, teachers, principals, entrepreneurs, counselors, artists, engineers? How many future mothers who will change the trajectory of their families? How many brilliant Black girls have gifts buried underneath behavior that adults have decided they don't have the patience to understand? Black girls deserve accountability, but they also deserve childhood. They deserve boundaries and grace, consequences and restoration, high expectations and nurturing. They deserve educators who refuse to reduce them to an attitude, a referral, a dress code violation, a tone of voice, or the worst decision they made that day. Maybe the question isn't, why is she like this? Maybe the question is, what has she experienced? And then, what does she need from me? And finally, would I still recognize her potential if she didn't make it easy for me to see? We cannot undo every interaction that came before us. We cannot repair every system overnight. But when that child walks into our classroom, our office, our school, we get a choice. We can become another adult who confirms everything she has learned to believe about school. Or we can interrupt the story. We can say, I see you. I hear you. I'm going to hold you accountable, but I'm not throwing you away. Because the goal of discipline should never simply be to make children pay for what they've done. The goal should be to help children learn what to do next. And sometimes advocacy looks like challenging an entire system. But sometimes advocacy looks like looking at a 17-year-old Black girl who has refused your consequence and saying, I'm going to find another way to keep you in school today. Because she still belongs here. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Advocate Podcast. I've been your host, Dr. Kristi N. Love. And until next time, keep asking the hard questions, keep showing up for our children, and keep advocating. Because children deserve adults who won't stop fighting for them. Be blessed.